Hey, y'all, I'm Bud Elliott, and this is my college football summer school series on Cover 3. I bring on the team experts from the 24/7 sports staff and ask them the questions I care about. No fluff. Which players will be toughest to replace? What position groups are sneakily better or worse than I realize? We get you the scoop on each team in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. Hey, y'all, welcome back into Bud Elliott Summer School. This is where we talk everything college football and get the real lowdown on these teams. And I'm really excited to talk Clemson today, bringing in Anna Adams of Clemson 24/7, joining us again. Anna, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. I enjoy doing this.
Absolutely. So Clemson last year, 11-3, ACC champions. Pretty much every power rating out there had them at a top 15 level. A pretty good season. Most teams in college football would take that. Obviously, Clemson has been so darn good in the last decade that I think it's a little disappointing for them. What is kind of the vibe there at Clemson right now?
I think coming off last year, especially the Orange Bowl loss to Tennessee, where it wasn't a close game, it was pretty defeating because the fan base was pretty irate with the offense and how it was going, to say the least. And I think a lot of fans didn't think that Dabo Swinney would make a change at offensive coordinator. And then in January, we saw that happen, and he did. And so I think now everyone, Clemson fans, seemed super stoked about Garrett Riley and what he can do with this offense. I think they're cautiously optimistic for year one based on a few things like this ceiling, I would say, a wide receiver for starters. This is Cade Klubnik's first year as a full-time starter. And then also on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, you've got a lot of talent, but this is still Wes Goodwin. I mean, he's still green as a defensive coordinator. He's only in year two. So I think last year you saw a drop off in some ways, not necessarily schematically, but maybe some playmaking aspects. So I think Clemson fans want to see the defense get back to kind of how it was under Brent Venables, and I think it will.
No doubt. So let's jump into that offense. Last year, most power ratings I think had them like top 40-ish. They do bring in Garrett Riley, which I mean personally I know on Cover 3 we've been saying for a long while, like, is this really an offensive staff that is befitting a team that tries to play at a national title level? I thought Garrett Riley was a home run. What are the biggest changes that viewers at home will notice when they watch Clemson this year?
Well, we asked passing game coordinator Kyle Richardson that, and he said you're going to see more plays being made, which, I mean, that's a nice answer, but if you want something a little more substantial, I think you'd probably point to just simplicity. I mean, Cade Klubnik told us early in spring ball, I mean, he estimated there was probably 80 plays that go into last year with any given week, and now that's down to maybe 30. And he was giving approximate numbers, and I don't know if that's right,
Sure.
but bottom line, it's a lot more simple. They're repping a ton of plays or a ton of the same play in practice. They're able to formation more, motion more. Wide receivers are staying on the same side. So before you'd have a boundary and a field receiver, and they'd switch sides depending on where they were supposed to be. Now there's, if you're on the left, you're on the left. If you're on the right, you're on the right. And that I think they're excited about that. We heard they're going to be more downfield passes. There's going to be more passes in the intermediate, in the middle of the field, that 10 to 15 yard sweet spot. And we saw that in the spring game, especially with the tight end usage. I do think that the running game will still be extremely important. I know you hear Garrett Riley and kind of his background and you think air raid, but especially with Clemson's personnel and trying to, play to their strengths. You have Will Shipley and Phil Maffa, pretty good offensive line. Yeah. I think you'll see the run game factor in quite heavily, especially if they spread out and you get some light boxes. But again, you've only got light boxes if you've got a threat outside, and I think that's where the biggest question is that outside wide receiver spot. Is there talent there?
Absolutely. So DJU leaves for Oregon State, and Cade Klubnik is now basically the guy. Did you see signs or hear anything from your sources that indicate that he is taking that next step, going from freshman to a lot of guys do make that leap in their second year?
Yeah, I think so. He's kind of been in the same boat as everyone else, including the offensive staff, trying to learn the offense. But I think one of the main things he tried to work on this offseason is not getting so antsy in the pocket. I don't know if you saw in the Orange Bowl, he flushed the pocket a lot, put them behind the chains in situations. So I think in the spring game, you saw that a little bit. I mean, it wasn't tackle, so you couldn't, I mean, it was a little subjective on whether he could have been sacked or not. But I think he's definitely working on trying to get rid of the ball faster, staying in the pocket. And I think too, like, he hasn't had his wide receivers this spring. So it's been a little hard to judge. Some of his wide receivers, they've been hurt. Bo Collins has been hurt. And Adam Randall, Troy Stellato. You're missing 3 true freshmen that are coming in. So, I mean, Dabo has been super, complimentary of how he was this spring. But it's one of those things that, let's see it before we kind of know what kind of play we're getting from Cade in the fall. Are we getting like potential Heisman contender play? Or are we getting, okay, he's a sophomore, he's got a lot of talent, but he needs another year before we kind of see that really blossom.
For sure. You mentioned the receiver position. If this unit becomes maybe not the strength of the offense, but something that is no longer a weakness, who has stepped up? Who has become a household name if they get to where obviously Clemson fans want them to go?
I think you probably want 2 of these, but at least one to really step up and become that alpha. And in that group, I would include Antonio Williams, who's now a sophomore, really good as a freshman. But I mean, if you're talking like competing with Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, those teams, like you really need him to take the next step. Bo Collins is probably the main one I would circle in terms of like, all right, this is his money year, junior season. Is he kind of be the same player that we've seen freshman and sophomore year, which is good, but not elite, can't necessarily beat an alpha cornerback one-on-one press coverage when the ball is coming to him. That's what I want to see. Can he do that this year? Adam Randall, true freshman last year, but he's been hurt, various injuries, didn't go through spring ball. So I'm skeptical that he's, going to be all of a sudden number 1, number 2 wide receiver this year. And you got Cole Turner, who's a sophomore. I mean, he's good, but again, do you have these wide receivers that Clemson fans have been used to seeing? And they brand themselves as wide receiver U. So that's kind of the question. So the expectations are high for sure, but I mean, that's what they've got to be in college football right now at the wide receiver position, I think, if you're going to try to win a national championship.
For sure. And Clemson fans are certainly used to Clemson receivers that names getting called at the top of the draft or pretty frequently, maybe not the last year or 2. Offensive line wise, so you do lose Jordan McFadden to the NFL draft. Everybody else who played returns. I assume there's pretty high confidence in this unit. Is there any real reason to worry there?
Well, Jordan McFadden was the left tackle. So that would probably be the main concern, is because there's not an obvious replacement. You're looking at Tristan Lee, a former 5-star, but he had a lot of work coming in to college to kind of reshape his body, learn the system. And he's done that, but it's just, is he ready to be a bona fide left tackle in college? He's competing with Marcus Tate for the position, who played left guard last year. So they're going to try to get the best 5 on the field. It remains to be seen kind of who takes over that left tackle position. We got a couple of freshmen there in the mix, including Harris Sewell. I think the right side is pretty set, center's set. So it's just that left side that we're kind of keeping an eye on going into summer and fall camp.
I feel like Clemson has done a nice job historically getting quality left tackle play out of guys who, at least by NFL standards, are more of a guard body. Right. So, like, I guess if McFadden being one, like, he's not going to play tackle in the NFL, I would assume. So it's, I feel
Mitch
like
Hyatt.
Mitch Hyatt. Right. Exactly. Shoot, there was somebody else too for a while that I can't remember now, but like, that's at least something that they're comfortable with as a program, I guess. Turning to the defense now, it was a top 25 defense, which most teams would really enjoy having. Not quite up to Clemson's standards. I want to hit you with this because obviously, new coordinator Wes. How would Venables have done with this personnel and with the injuries they suffered?
Yeah, that's a good question. Clemson's defense got better last year as the year went on. So I think in terms of player development, it probably would have been about the same. But I think in the beginning of the year, you saw things that we just weren't used to seeing, which included like some leakage against the run, like up the middle, like against Florida State, for example. Like Florida State was able to run the ball in Clemson, and it was kind of weird. Like you would have I feel like with Venables, you would have seen those corrections made earlier. Cornerback, I don't know how much you can put that on a defensive coordinator because they lost Andrew Booth and Mario Goodrich the year before to the NFL draft, and they were breaking in new players at the position and had a bunch of injuries, like you said. So that was kind of tough to evaluate. But yeah, this year, I think just Wes is just more comfortable as a play caller. I mean, he's got a sharp mind. I think everyone in college football knows that, but it's different when you've got the headset on and you're calling the plays and, you're on the sideline and it's just the game speed just a little bit more. It's just a little faster. So he seems optimistic, though, that like last year was kind of what he needed to get under his belt. What I'm most interested in is the pass rush at defensive end.
I was going to go there next. I'm glad you lead me there. So you lose Henry, you lose Murphy, you lose Brian Brzee. How does this unit avoid I assume it's going to have somewhat of a drop off, but how does it avoid having a big drop off or maybe a small improvement, I guess?
Well, I think defensive tackle could be even better just because you have Tyler Davis stays healthy. Ruggiero could have gone to the NFL this year and probably gotten drafted. And then I think Peyton Page is going to be a good player. He played hurt last year. He's taken a step forward. And then, staff can't stop talking about freshman Peter Woods. So, that's a good rotation right there. So, but defensive end is kind of where the question marks are in my mind. You've got Xavier Thomas, but he has struggled with injury. He didn't play in the spring. So can he stay healthy? And then on the other side, there's no obvious answer. And coming out of spring, you have a couple of guys that work hard, practice hard, do everything you want, but are they beating their man one-on-one, getting to the quarterback? I don't think so. So I thought it was interesting. Defensive ends coach Lemansky Hall said this spring, he's like, I don't care if you're grading at 90%. He's like, I want someone, I don't care if he's like, and you're not making plays. But if you're grading at like 52%, but you're getting to the quarterback or making plays, and I'll play you, which isn't normally something we hear from Clemson staff.
Yeah,
that's which I think the defensive coaches feel a little pressure this year, put on them by Dabo a little bit. Just say, hey, last year was not what we are up to par, up to standard. So bigger emphasis on making plays this year at all three levels.
Linebacker should be totally fine with Trotter and Carter. I assume it's hard to lose a guy as athletic as Simpson, but Trotter Carter is a great combo to have.
Totally, and they can play multiple positions. And then you've got Wade Woodaz, who will play the Sam, who played well last year in a backup role. And then it'll be interesting to see how much he's really on the field. How much are they going to play the Sam linebacker versus the nickel? That's Andrew Makuba. He's a smaller body type to play in the box, but if he's not a liability there, I think you'll see him on the field a lot. He might prove too valuable to take off.
So the secondary, probably the most concerning unit on the team last year at times. Just I remember looking weekly at the injury report when we were doing our coverage relocks. Like, who is actually going to be playing on Saturday for Clemson's secondary? Everybody who took any kind of meaningful snap is back. So can you help me sort this out? Like, who would you project to be the starters, and how good do you think this unit can be?
Nate Wiggins will start at cornerback on one of the sides, and he had a bad game against Wake Forest, and everyone saw it, but he's a really talented player, and I think if he just does the little things right and becomes a better tackler and a more committed tackler on the edges, he's a great athlete. He's got great length, so he's everything you want in an NFL cornerback. So they're hoping that he's kind of that lockdown guy this year. And then on the other side, there should be some competition. You have Sheridan Jones, who's a veteran, but he's not necessarily someone that wows you with kind of his measurables. You've got now Jaden Lucas and Toriano Pride, who are sophomores, but they got a lot of experience last year because of injury, so they're in the mix. So it should be a good group at corner. And then at safety, you got a lot of experience coming back. You got RJ Mickens, who I think could be one of the more underrated safeties, one of the more underrated defenders in the country this year. And then Jalen Phillips, a veteran, probably play the free safety spot. And like I mentioned, Andrew Makuba, he'll be in there too. A couple of freshmen that might get some playing time. Khalil Barnes, I would keep an eye on him. Wake Forest, of course, identified him first before the big dogs started coming in, and he decommitted and went to Clemson, but was a playmaker in the spring game, had an interception. So they've got a lot of versatility in the second and third levels, especially when you consider Barrett Carter can drop back, Wade Woodez can drop back. You can do different things, which I think Clemson might have to do, especially in terms of generating a pass rush. Disguising certain things, bringing guys from different areas, because I just don't know if you're going to get it from your two defensive end spots on a consistent basis.
That makes sense. Having a secondary that's much better certainly will help with that.
Yeah.
I want to shift here. Couple more before we let you go. I really appreciate taking the time. And Adams here from Clemson 24/7 does a great job. You guys should definitely check out the site. It's where I go for all my Clemson news. And BT Potter, underrated, I think, kicker. I mean, he's a really good kicker and a great kickoff guy. I mean, like over the last couple of years, I don't know if there's a better guy at kickoffs in terms of burying opponents inside the 25 and or, like holding the touchbacks. Who's the new kicker, and do we know if he's any good or not?
We don't know, and we don't know, to answer both.
Oh, okay, for both.
Yeah. So that was probably, I think, mid-spring, Dabo said that was the one thing that he was probably most disappointed in or most unsure of was kicking. It had just been too inconsistent. You have Aiden Swanson. He's a fifth year guy. So in other words, he's been in the program for a while, and he still just hasn't really taken that step. He's been in scholarship since he was a freshman, but hasn't taken that step to claim the job. They've got other guys in there, Robert Gunn, Jack Smith, kind of all competing for those specialist spots, and we'll see how it shakes out. I just think you've had inconsistency. Dabo said, you'll have one punt, just absolutely boom it, and then you'll have a field goal, a 60-yard field goal made, and then the next day they can't do just like the most basic things. So I don't know, that could be something certainly to keep an eye on, especially in close games.
Yeah, that was so last year only 6% of Clemson kickoffs came outside of the 30, which led the nation. So I was like, that's kind of a sneaky little advantage for Wes's defense there.
Absolutely.
Something to watch. All right, I'm going to let you put on your GM hat here. Clemson didn't take any transfers this year, and obviously that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing if your rest of your roster is dynamite, but even Georgia took a couple this year. So we are seeing teams start to do that more. If you were Clemson's GM, what positions would you have targeted for transfers?
If you've been listening to this interview, I think the first position probably won't surprise you. I'll go wide receiver. I mean, if they're healthy, it's not a lack of bodies. It's not like they need to get more depth at the position. I just think there was and there probably still is. I think Chris Hummer had a good article up recently saying there's still good wide receiver talent in the portal. But Clemson didn't test those waters, and I'm not saying I'm surprised they didn't, but I think they could have. But I get it. You have a big freshman class coming in at wide receiver, 3, potentially 4. You have one athlete that could play either way, but he's going to start out playing wide offense, so that's 4. So I get you don't want to bring in a portal guy from that perspective, but I guess I would have just gotten someone that's proven, that shows that they can be that outside wide receiver and make those catches on the sideline and beat their man down the field. Because I don't know if Clemson's going to have that.
Makes sense. All right, and final one here, and really, really appreciate the time today. Other than quarterback, what is the one position in your mind where the drop off between starter to backup is the most obvious?
Starter to backup. That's a good question. Let me go through it in my head. Gotta go offense or defense?
You can go whichever one you want.
Okay. I might go center. Will Putnam has been there for a while, just really steady. Everything you want in a center, in a college center. And then backup, you have a couple of different guys that could probably fill that role. Ryan Linthicum, Trent Howard, but I don't know if Clemson wants either one of them consistently in there. And I think Will Putnam will play a ton of snaps. So, and center, I mean, that's probably one more of the more underrated, important positions in college football. I mean, if you're your regular center, if you don't notice them that much, that's probably a good thing. But if you're noticing the center play, that's not a great thing, in certain aspects. So he hasn't had an issue of staying healthy. So Clemson hopes that continues this year.
Awesome. And Adams, Clemson 24/7. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bud.